Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast brought to you by Joint Flows. Today we've got the pleasure of being joined by Haydon Zaccaria.
That's right.
Haydon is the sales manager of the UK at Tipalti and has had an illustrious career, should I say, which we'll hear all about. But welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, really well. Thanks for having me. Yeah, excited to have a discussion and yeah, see where the conversation takes us. But I've been listening to your podcast loads, so really excited to be on.
Brilliant. So we always like to start at the same point, which is a bit of a brief introduction, so our listeners know who Hayden is, how you've got to where you've got to. Tell us who you are.
Well, I'm going to go back to the start just to bore you, but I used to be a plumber, so I always like to say plumber to president's club because it's been a long journey, but uh, always been in sales. So I used to be, well, semi-professional footballer. This is without giving you War and Peace. Just want to give you a high-level intro, just to maybe inspire some people that have been, trying to get into sales, et cetera, from outside the industry. But yeah, was a semi-professional footballer at Mansfield Town. That didn't work out, which crushed me. Then I became a plumber. And then my brother works in recruitment, so I followed suit and went into uni to get a degree because back in the day you had to have a degree to get into sales or to get into entry level sales at
Oh, I
least.
remember those times.
Yeah. But I did cold calling as a job at uni, so I've always been doing sales since probably the mid 2000s, whatever. So 2009 I've been cold calling. And then left uni, moved down to London, lived above a kebab shop for a couple of years, which was fun. Didn't know anyone, but got into sales down here. And yeah, been in sales ever since. I've sold all sorts of things. And then around 10 years ago, I realized I wanted to get into software sales because there was a higher glass ceiling on earnings and obviously the potential to do really well. So moved into software sales. I can go into how I got into software sales, which is a funny story. But yeah, worked at a couple of companies specifically selling into finance professionals. So I worked at SAP and then moved into a company called Tipalti. Was the founding AE at Tipalti, signed the very first deal in the UK when we had 20
Nice.
people. We're a startup, I'd say, within a scale up. So we've gone from 20 people in the UK right across EMEA. We've got over like 100 to 150 employees now. And I've been here for 4 years and I've a couple of promotions, went from AE to senior AE, team lead, and now sales manager for the UK. And yeah, going really well. Been there 4 years, and then ultimately I'm here now. So yeah, that's my journey.
What a journey. What a journey. That's amazing. I think there's a lot we can double tap into or double
Yeah,
click into as well.
yeah.
Nice. Well, good to have you, Aiden. So, tell us a little bit between, like, are there any similarities between being a plumber and working in sales, SaaS sales?
Um, Not really. I mean, let's.
You always got you got unstuck deals in sales and you got
Yeah,
unstuck
I mean,
drains in plumbing. That's the
the joke.
similarity right there.
Yeah, the joke my VP used to say was there's something about pipeline there, but yeah, no, it's terrible. But yeah, I think there's something to be said. I think the grind of being able to show up every day. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in sales that you don't want to do. There's the as you say, you want to eat the frog at the start of the day. You might have to make some cold calls. You might have to do some admin. I mean, that manual labor that I did to obviously get into a work site very early when it's cold and dark and miserable. And I just use it as an anchor. So when I'm looking to hire people now, if they've had any sort of like experience that's like off piste or
Hmm.
manual labor, they've had a lot of a few setbacks, things like that. I think it's more useful to draw from because at any time of the day you can sort of draw from that experience and think, oh, I've had a bad day in sales, but guess what? I get free lunch. I'm in a nice office, and I'm not on a work site. Yeah, freezing my butt off. So I think for me, that's how I use it. It's a nice uh, bit of way to sort of reflect on where I
Yeah.
am and appreciate, where I'm going really. So yeah.
And do you draw any experience from your sports background? Like, is there anything that you've learned through sports that you're applying today?
I wonder why
Yeah.
Mick's asking that question. Maybe he was.
Okay.
Is there a reason why? What's your past like, Mick? I'm pretty sure
So,
it's always something he wants to lean into.
Yeah, I love that. Do you know what? I never used to buy into that when people said, "Oh, has so and so got a sports background? I want them for sales." Obviously, been in the industry a little while now, I get it completely. It's not just the fact that people are inclined to win and there's competition and that determination of what sales is. So there's that competition element, but it's more around like camaraderie and communication. Like, can you speak and learn how to share
Mm.
a shared goal of working towards something? And I think people that have been in that team environment, they just get it. They get the camaraderie, they get the togetherness, and you win, you lose together. Sounds really cliche, but it's true. It is something that does transcend sales. If you've had that sales background, sports background, it does actually apply to sales. Obviously, every unique case is unique, but yeah, I think if someone's got a strong sales background, it is an indicator to probe into whether they're going to be successful. So it's not a guarantee, but I'd say it's an indicator.
Yeah, I also think there's something to be said if you have been a sports person at a relatively decent level. There's an element of consistency, turning up day in, day out, no matter what's going on, not spiraling,
Yeah.
controlling the controllables, all these kind of things come into play as well. And I do see that a lot. And I joked about it before, but Mick's also a former international gymnast as well, who's represented France. So I see a lot of that
Oh
in the
wow.
way he works, as well as like other people that I've come across as well. So yeah, lots of synergies there between sports people and being successful at sales.
Yeah.
As we go into this conversation, we're going to speak a little bit about, you know, the way deals are managed and how it is you
Yeah.
get the team to manage deals and things as well. So I think it's
Yeah.
important that our listeners get a bit of context in terms of the type of deals that go through Tilpatli, what's the kind of, sales duration, how complex are these processes?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how much you know about Tipalti, but we're a financial operations platform. In terms of revenue, I always like to say to people it's going up to the right, but we are a big scale up. So we've done lots of funding rounds, and what we specialize, and the reason why we've done so well up to this date, is that we focus on mid-market, upper mid-market companies. So companies that are typically fast growing and they have added complexities, so they require the software that we sell. So we deal with companies that are predominantly mid-market. We do work with S&B. We do work with enterprise sales as well. So our sales cycles can range from anything from a couple of months up to a year in some cases.
Mm.
But typically, if I just did my QBR, our average deal length is 61 days. And then average contract values, it can be up to, I don't want to give too much away, but it's
Yeah,
it's
of
it's
course.
it's not in the hundreds of
Mm.
thousands, but it's not very small. So in terms of complexity, I think a lot of the themes I'm seeing, and I'm probably just probably repeating what other guests have said, that we find that a lot of enterprise process is coming downstream into the mid market. So for example, when I was at Concur, same relative market. Well, I specifically worked in mid market at Concur, SAP. We didn't get many legal red lines, for example, and we didn't really
Mm.
have to go through many security IT conversations. That's completely changed. So, a lot of the stuff we work with, we're having legal involved. We'll have, multiple stakeholders. It will go to a board, perhaps. So, I think the one theme that I would say that, you know, if you, manage a mid-market team, or you're in mid-market, you need to start approaching those deals with more of an enterprise focus than you might have made even just 5 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think is causing that shift to happen? I think it's, I'm part of various different communities of GTM leaders and stuff like this. And, it's
Yeah,
basically everything you've said has been echoed in multiple channels. But what do you think is driving that change? Why is this happening?
I think it's to do with risk, cost, accountability. So, have you guys read the Jolt Effect? You read that book? Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant book. When I read that book, my sort of mind was blown. As in, we historically and traditionally think that people are sort of, well, buyers, emission versus commission. People are more worried about not doing something because they feel like they're missing out, and we do ROIs, and of course we need to sort of deliver that value there. But really, the reality is that people are are more afraid of messing up. So they're more afraid of buying a solution, and it's gonna, they're gonna go to the CFO, and then when it rolls out, it's just gonna be sat on the shelf, or it just goes wrong, etc., etc., etc. So what they want to do, they want to spread that accountability across the company, and bring in more stakeholders. So it's more of a group accountability piece rather than maybe an individual person. So after reading that, that shifted my whole mindset when I came to Tipalti. We had some enablement on that in the first year, and then from there I just ran with that. So I obviously another question to you guys: have you heard of the bow tie method from learning by
Design.
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that's massive. So we have go to market, go to base. I think like all companies are shifting to that mindset where go to base, post go to market signature. So the account management team onboarding, that is just as important as your go to market team. So for me, how can I bring as much value from that post signature experience into the pre signature experience? Not only differentiate myself as a seller, but create that environment where the accountability piece is being listened to. So the buyer is more aware of what is going on post signature, and they're more comfortable, and therefore they're more likely to sign. So that's how I try and run my sort of team and the region. I work with an enablement and onboarding closely to sort of alleviate those concerns that we're finding in this day and age.
And I completely agree with you. And I think the we are running a webinar in about an hour and a half. So by the time you listen to that, the webinar was last week. But it's live. You can listen to it. And it's really about how do you manage those more complex SMB cycles now, where you've got the same level of complexity as you would have on a six-figure deal.
Yeah.
And it's a different, like a lot of the webinar will be speaking about exactly what you say, Haydon, about how do you de-risk the purchase so that someone specifically doesn't mess up on the buying side, and how do you manage that risk spread activity on something you've got no control over, which is the buying cycle. How does that? I understand you're working with enablement and onboarding, but like specifically, what do you do? Do you bring them into the selling cycle? Like, what's the?
It depends, because in a startup, time is precious, and it's all about bandwidth and trying to make sure that we're utilizing the right people. So what we're trying to do at Tipalti, we're trying to enable the A's as much as possible to take on as many cross-functional aspects of those roles respectively. So for example, we used to have SC-led demos, solutions consultant-led demos, and that was fine. But what we want to do is increase the velocity for the A's. So now we have AE-led demos, we have AE-led implementation discussions, onboarding discussions. So we're conscious to bring in the right heads at the right time for those more larger strategic deals, but for those high velocity SMB mid-market, upper mid-market deals, we want to make sure that we're delivering all that value, but making sure we're not slowing down the sales process, because what is it, 70% of the buying cycle is done before you even speak to a customer. So these people, these companies are ready to buy, and if you're slowing down the process by adding heads, which you need to deliver the value for this jolt effect to alleviate the concerns, but you don't want to conflate or make the buy-in process slower or subpar for the prospect. So there's a balance, but essentially what we try and do is enable the prospect, the customer, as much as possible by bringing in all these different functions, so they're happy.
Yeah.
How do you? So it feels like you're managing more and more people on your side as well.
Yeah.
How do you teach that to some like newer salespeople who are they don't know how to run project management. They don't know how to resource orchestrate. You spoke about having limited resource on the starter. They don't know how to prioritize that. And if anything, what I find is that you put them into a scenario where there's like quarterly target. The target is going up every year, so there's pressure to pull to pull the cover towards you. Like you want all the resource for you. At your level, when you're managing a team, how do you decide and how do you teach that, your deal looks good, but Bob's deals look better, and therefore you're going to have to manage it yourself because Bob's needs the solution engineers on the deal.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the best ways of doing it initially is having like frameworks to allow to give some sort of structure. So, for example, we have a certain criteria. If it meets the criteria of the deal sizing, we'll bring in like extra resource to put eyes on it. That's in the first instance. But what I tell my team is that I think when you're closing a deal, we talk about multi-threading, right? I think it's equally as important, if not more important, to multi-thread internally. Have you got the backing of your internal team? If you can't even ask, if you can't ask a solutions consultant or, an onboarding manager or, even SDRs or anyone internally for help, how on earth are you going to influence a customer to sign? So what I tell them to do is you need to spend extra time with those people to build up a relationship. So, going for a coffee, just informal time with them where you're building that rapport. So when you ask for those difficult asks, the barrier to those answers being positive is much lower. Whereas what I find is the people that struggle the most, they haven't got the relationships, they haven't put the time into, and there's this sort of friction. And it might be a message over Slack and it gets misinterpreted and it's just a nightmare. So for me, it's about having a positive culture and trying to get those relationships cross-functionally as positive as possible. So you're almost like not friends, but you're on that sort of like comfortable basis where you feel like you can tell each other anything without a filter. And then when you get to that level, it's like, right, I need this now. The deal and revenue is most important. Let's do it. So yeah, that's basically what I try to encourage.
Yeah. Yeah, you speak a lot of the same language that we do for joint flows as well about orchestration, alignment, the orchestration internal piece, I think is key as well, knowing when to bring in resource, how you prioritize that resource, which is really good. But no matter how you put your best foot forward, whether it's how you communicate with the buying team or what you're doing internally, there are also times when deals just end up getting stuck anyway, right? So what do you find is the most common cause that you're seeing that prevents a deal from moving forward the way you expected it to?
Well, Mick's gonna love this one because Mick loves jujitsu. So if anyone, I suppose I'll do it. So for anyone listening, me and Mick do jujitsu, not together, maybe one day, all together. But I always say this analogy I use for the team. I say, how do you get out of a rear naked choke?
You don't get in to start with.
Yeah, there you go. So
There you
yeah,
go.
right. That's exactly it. That's the exact answer. So basically, I find a lot of these problems, these bottlenecks that you get in deals, is because you've not qualified the opportunity properly at the start. So I think that's the easiest way to get out of them is that you don't get into the wrong deals at the start. If you do happen to get into a deal where it is stuck, hopefully, if you've got a proper, thorough qualification criteria, you're getting less and less of them. I'll give you a good example. Like when we set up in the UK, we used to have tons of reactive methods of re-engaging the buyer. So have you got their mobile number? Have you chased their boss? Have you done this? And we were getting a lot of that. And we don't hardly get any of that now because we're qualifying properly up front. So it's more of a case, I'd say, of qualifying properly at the start, making sure you've got the right champion, not a coach. So yeah, we were dealing with coaches, people that didn't have that influence over the economic buyer at the start of the journey. So yeah, having that thorough, proper qualification process is probably the best way to navigate that. And then when you do get those curveballs, which do happen, you might get a new persona that comes in. Of course, they're on a case-by-case basis, but having a good, thorough qualification process up front is probably the best way to navigate it.
Yeah. Let's speak a little bit about qualification.
Yeah.
How do
I
you
thought you were gonna say jiu-jitsu. Yes.
we can speak about UFC
How do you do
afterwards,
a rear
but
naked choke?
um it, how do you so you have a team, right?
Yeah.
And your team have different skill sets, and some
Oh,
people are
yeah.
better at one thing than another. And
Yeah.
yet, when we speak about qualification, there's always a requirement to make sure you're thorough in what you're doing for the very reason that you've just explained. So, how do
Yeah.
you ensure that the skill set is there for everybody within the team so they're able to qualify effectively?
Yeah. Well, I think there needs to be a lot of coaching. So normally what I found with a lot of the people when they come into the company new, they've had a certain level. And then luckily for me, I had very look, I've got, any decent or good sales professional should always say they've always got more to learn, which I have. But I'll be honest, I've had a very thorough sales training through SAP. They do great training, Concur specifically. I was trained on the Sandler method, so the pain funnel, and then through Tipalti, I've always had great enablement. We have great coaching on sales methodology, etc., etc. So when people come into the company, they have a certain level of um, of business or sales acumen, but I find that there's always quite a way to go for me for where they need to get to that level where they're very good at qualifying. Um, for me, I think it is just a case of running through the sales cycles and having active coaching, and just being a proactive manager and going through those. So going through the post-mortems on the ones that didn't close and then looking at the good stuff that did work. But I do find with salespeople as well, typically new ones or ones that haven't had that good, thorough one-to-one coaching. Um, I'll give you a quick story. But when I was trying to get into software sales, there was a guy who told me like there's 4 stages of learning. You probably I don't know if you've heard of it, where it's like you're unconsciously incompetent. If you heard that one,
That
yeah,
rings
you
a
have
bell. Yeah.
yeah. So you've got unconsciously incompetent, consciously incompetent, then you've got consciously competent, and then unconsciously competent, right? So you don't know what you're doing wrong, then you know what you're doing wrong, then you know what you're doing right, and then you're just so good you don't even think about getting good. You just are good. And it's taken so what I'm trying the reason why I'm saying that I wasn't just showing off to say that I remembered it. It was the fact that what it's ironic when you get into sales, you find the people that are brand new, they're very good at talking, they've got a great conversational flow. And then
Mm,
as they're trying to remember all the stuff that you tell them, like the pain funnel or whatever your criteria is, that they're sort of all over the place. They're not really actively listening. And then it's ironic because once you become unconsciously competent, you go right back to how you sounded, why you hired someone, and they're effortlessly talking through the process and they're not having to
yeah.
think of the methodology. So I try and instill that. So what I try and do is get them to obviously use the criteria, but I just say, just relax. You sound like you don't sound like yourself. Just try and
Yeah.
sound like yourself
Mm.
and build in those criteria and it will come. So the way I coach, I get into the weeds with them, but I ultimately get them to sound like a human being. People buy from people. But if you can sound like a human, you come across as assertive, competent, and you run the sales cycle without them even realizing, which is the nirvana, which is where everyone should be, you become a killer. So it's awesome to watch that progression. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind of do.
Aw- Awesome.
That's good. I think it's rare to see people, uh, especially at your level, Aiden, where there's a real genuine interest in one-to-one coaching. Like for a lot of leaders, it goes completely over their head. And I think part of it is because you often get promoted from an individual contributing role into a people management role. And if you don't have that switch to say, hey, it's not for me to go pitch now, it's for me to teach how to pitch and coach through the deal, then I think you miss the boat a little bit. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of leaders do. Um, but I have a question around how do you set, how do you do the coaching but upwards in your company as well? So, like we spoke about, there might be a difference now in expectation on those smaller deals taking longer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not on the field, you might not be completely cognizant of that and be like, "Oh, is the guy become incompetent? Is it a product issue? Whereas maybe it's just the market. How do you get this message to leadership to say, look, guys, look, we're doing just as good as before, but the sales cycle is changing because the FOMU stuff and all of that. Is there a tactic to manage expectations upwards?
Yeah, I mean, we have like, so for example, we've just done around the QBRs. I think the idea is having a management structure that's very like across the board, and it helps that you've had. So for example, it does help having leadership that they know how to get their hands dirty in the deals because they've got that empathy.
Yeah.
It's a lot more difficult when they don't have that sort of experience, even specifically in your product. But if they've got it in your sort of market segment, like, for example, if you've got a VP that knows how to run mid-market deals, that helps. But if they know how to run say a Tipalti deal at mid-market, that's even better. So I think that helps. And then having that flat level of communication is amazing. Or I think it's critical to be able to get that empathy, not just the empathy of how you run deals, to understand what we're up against on the on the ground floor, but just to understand what our bandwidth and what our asks are for when we need it. So the great thing about where I'm at the minute is that when we set up in Europe, we had our general manager at the time, who's now our president. So we have our CRO that comes over, and we're only a small pocket of the business in terms of foot count, but in terms of the revenue share, we are a real significant player within the company now, and we've got visibility across all of those different channels. So to answer your question, I think it's about having a hierarchy of management that are open to having not just meetings, but deep conversations, and added, like I said about cross-functionally, is getting that extra time in the diary. So for example, when our CRO came over, we had lunch with him. He really cares about what's going on the floor. We had our CRO do a sort of a town hall with the AEs where he was talking to them.
Nice.
So stuff like that, it just goes that extra mile, rather than someone that's sat in an office far away and they're just not interested. So I think it's having a culture of inclusiveness of, where salespeople are respected and listened to. And obviously big businesses like us can take a little while to get going because we're a big ship, and to steer a big ship can take a little while. But if there's change that's being requested by the AEs, the people that are doing the action on the ground floor, then that's the company does listen. So I would say it's more about the company culture, and we've got a great company culture. So yeah, I'd say that.
Awesome. And we spoke, I think, up until now, a lot about internally how it is deals are managed, how the resources are orchestrated, how the coaching takes place. If we now think about what's happening externally, one of the things that you mentioned is that requirement to multi-thread has, gone up significantly because obviously there's more stakeholders who are involved now. How do you get the team to go about doing this to ensure you've got the right people involved on the buying committee? And how do you ensure that they communicate with the relevant personas at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways that we've navigated this. I think it's really simple, but it's actually just being aware of what's required up front rather than being reactive. I think it's a sign of a company that hasn't got the systems in place, where they don't really know what that buying team looks like already. Whereas we pretty much know who we need to involve from the start. So for us, it's very matter of fact to get them involved. We'll lead and we'll say, look, we need this person, this person, this person for
Nice.
X, Y, and Z reasons. So our recommendation would be that on this call we do this, and then we'd involve these for that. And that works tremendously well. And our close rates are on the up, and they're doing really well because of those reasons. You can go even more granular into that. So say if you go into mutual action plans, and so we use Clarialign, which is a great mapping tool. That is a way of, like, when I said don't get stuck in a process or don't get stuck in a rear naked choke. If you get in the rear naked choke, bring out, we like to include maps on all applicable deals anyway. But if we really have a feeling from the off that if it's not something we'd typically use a map for anyway, if it's over a certain deal size, that's a great way of proactively navigating those stakeholders and bringing them in. So it's more around like I said, it's like the culture of the buying cycle and just knowing up front, but then you as an assertive and recommended advisor suggesting and tell, you know, like a consultant, like you go to the doctor almost, of like, this is what I recommend, this is what we should do. And that's part of that qualification piece. You know, a champion will pull those resources in, a coach won't. So yeah, it's more of a fact of learning those personas and then proactively seeking them as you go into the call and prepping for it. So calling them by first name, doing the research on that front as well, that
Yeah.
helps, and then mapping them out in a mutual action plan.
Yeah, I love that. And then when you find, or what I tend to see is if there's a lack of participation on your champion side, it's usually a good indicator that you could probably qualify this one out. Not 100% of the time, but more
No,
often than
no,
not.
no, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Negative reversing doesn't sound like it's something that's on your priority at the minute. And then
Yes,
do they
exactly.
lean in? Do they lean out? Do they lean away? Things of that nature. I mean, it's basic stuff, but it's surprising that how many people don't do it. And I think like it's but like you say, all these little nuances of how to move the deal forward and how to make them watertight, you know, these have compounded over lots of years. And I think it's great when you bring it, you know, you go to a new company or you bring in someone in from another company that sells into the same space and they can give you different perspectives and you can learn from them. So yeah, I love all those little nuances and tricks to sort of make the sales cycle super tight. So yeah.
Absolutely.
And what about executive alignment? So like one of those tactics. So we speak, even us internally, we, you know, there's a, it's not a metric, but we know that if we're not in WhatsApp terms very early on with the champion, the deal is going to be hard to move. And we also know that if there's a delay in mutual action plan, it's not your champion trying to screw you over. It's there's a gap in the requirements you haven't fulfilled. Either you don't know what the requirement is,
Yeah.
or whatever evidence you've provided is not sufficient, and now the champion is pinning. Like it just doesn't know what to do with it. But a lot of companies are now speaking about almost execs running the initial discoveries. You know, like maybe not the discovery, but bringing those people really early on in the cycle
Yeah.
to get alignment. Do you see this as a weapon or?
I think it is. I truly I do believe it's like the saying horses for course. It depends on the sales cycle. So you can have a it depends on how educated your buyer is and qualifying the champion up front. I think I do trust champions to sometimes not involve the ultimate decision maker if it's a CFO. Obviously, best case scenario we have to, but you know, sometimes you know CFOs employ people to do jobs and they trust those people if they're trustworthy. So there's a balance. I think it's all. I think it goes back to what I said, you know, 10 minutes ago. It's like, are you being transparent with the buyer and just having that upfront conversation? Like, have you bought before? I'd like to help you through this process. Typically, we do this. How does that sound? Or, you know, for your use case, it sounds like you've done this before, so we might not need to include that person.
Yeah.
However, if it's something you're trying to build a business case, in my opinion, I'd recommend bringing that person in. But if you're telling me you've already spoken to them and you've already had sign off, then yes,
Mm.
we'll go down this route. So it's just more about, have you qualified the process as much as the the route to the signature as well. So yeah, like I say, there's many ways to go about it, and every deal is different. But yes, you ultimately want to know if that CFO in our use case has had that sign off. If they haven't, what does it look like, and do you need help getting there? And that's basically it. So I think it's just been, if you don't know what that route to the signature is from your champion, yes, that's a red flag. And if they're super, even if they're motivated to do something with you, they might not have the clout and therefore not a champion. So it's been super it's been super specific with the champion to make sure you're comfortable. If they're going to sell on your behalf, you need to really know that they're going to do that. And if they don't, you can help them navigate that with bringing the CFO in. So yeah.
Very strong. Last question for me, a little bit on a different topic, but we spoke about metrics and QBRs and all of that. What's the most overrated sales metric you think sales teams are typically tracking?
Oh my God.
I can give you mine. I can give you mine, and that gives you a little bit of time to
Go on
think.
then. Yeah, no, I think I've got it, but go on, yeah.
All right. So I think there's a lot of fluff around around sentiment, like, and I think because you're often under-threaded, so like 1 or 2 people that are usually trying to push the deal as well as you are, with you, then it's a bit of an echo chamber. And often you get like digital sales rooms make that look like a success because your champion has clicked on the links that you've sent to your champion. And that's
Yeah.
a good indicator of success. And we always position it like, well, what's the reverse? Like, what do you expect, that your champion's not gonna click on the links that you send? It's a
So
full
you mean like causation versus correlation versus
correlation. Yeah.
causation versus causation? Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's a really valid point. And for example, of course you're going to use a mutual action plan on all the deals that close. And it's like you could say that I use the laptop for all my deals, and therefore laptop a closing tool. So
Or do they breathe? Do they breathe air? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyone that understands stats should know, well, relatively, if you've got a basic understanding of stats and correlation versus causation, there's a balance to like digging into further details of whether something is actually doing that. I think for me, what I despise the most in sales is meetings for meetings' sakes, but then dials, dials for dials' sake. I know it goes back to the start of the funnel, but I think what I like what we're doing specifically. I won't give you everything away, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to do account-based marketing, but from an AE level. So we've got a smaller set of accounts, but we're going deeper into them. And I think that aligns better with trying to find your ICP. So when you know that these customers come online, because like I said, 70% of them, what you want to be doing is finding or nurturing them to the point where they're ready to buy, and going deeper into the accounts. Like, we're treating mid-market prospects like enterprise prospects, really. We're going really deep into the accounts. So the idea is that, yes, there's KPIs of dials, etc. But really what we're looking for is like penetration across each targeted account, which is way better than just like, right, you've done like 200 dials over this amount of time. Great, fantastic. We don't, that's what I don't like. Whereas purposeful metrics of how many into a certain account, I like that. So yeah, it would be that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I can see why you've been very successful in your career up until now, Hayden. You're literally a fountain of knowledge. I think you're one of the most, or you communicate what you know better than most that have come on this podcast as well. So, I think you're an outstanding individual. So thank you for joining us. But we do have a wrap-up question as well. So the way it works is our last guest has left a question for you to answer. Once you've answered that, then you will go on to leave a question for our next guest to answer. So the question that's been left for you is, how do you see AI changing how we sell in the future?
I'm glad you asked that, because I do have a prepared answer, only because I've been thinking about it. Yeah. Because like you say, I think it's scary and exciting at the same time. Which one is it, scarier or more exciting? That's to be determined. But I do think it's gonna I think it's gonna go from the bottom up in terms of what it can automate. So it's not going to be like there's going to be no SDRs, and it's not going to be like there's no AEs. It's just that I think you're going to empower the people from the top more to where you've got like super AEs and super SDRs. So there's just going to be more. Is that the question? What was the question again? Where do you see it going? Yeah, where you see it going, right? I think what you're going to have
how do you see AI changing how we sell in the future?
Yeah, so I think what you're going to have is 100% you're going to have like an AI assistant that's going to be able to formulate all the notes from the call and fill in your your medic or medpic and spice notes, whatever you want to do on your Salesforce. That's the basic stuff. But I think what it's going to be able to do is give the AE the ability to be like as powerful as 3 AEs, because you're getting away with all that admin. So I think it's just going to make. But what I think, it's not the fact of you're going to have less headcount. It's just that you're going to be able to empower a better AE to be more powerful, rather than having, say, 3 AEs that are different standards. You can take that better AE and enable them to do more with their time. So you're going to leverage the better A's more. I think that's basically what's going to happen. But the timeline on that, I have not got any idea. So, but that's my gut feeling.
Awesome. And what question would you like to leave for our next guest?
Well, this is just off the top of my head, but if you were to do it all again, what would you do different? And you have to give an answer.
I love that.
They'll
Awesome.
normally say, "Oh no, I'd change. I wouldn't change
I
anything."
don't change anything. I have no regrets. I've heard that
That's what
before.
they'll say.
Absolutely. Haydon, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure our listeners will take a lot from this particular session. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Until next time. See you later. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye bye.